My name is Sarah, and I'm 32 years old. 21 years ago, my parents handed me $20 in cash, told me to figure out my own dinner, and left me alone for what they said would be 3 hours. Those 3 hours turned into 3 days. 3 days that nobody in my family ever properly explained. And what started as abandonment became a pattern so deep, so systematic, that it took 2 decades and a catastrophic party before anyone was willing to tell the truth about what happened to me. Before I tell you what that party looked like, what the police found when they arrived, and how it all connected back to that $20 bill, please take a moment to like and subscribe. I love this community, and I want to reach more people who might be going through something similar. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, what time it is there. Now let me take you back to where everything started. To a Tuesday afternoon when I was 11 years old and my parents made a choice that rewired my entire understanding of family and safety. I remember the date because it was right after my birthday. I'd just turned 11 3 days before. My older brother Marcus had his school play that evening, the kind of elementary school production where you watch kids mumble through lines and forget their choreography, but our parents treated it like he was performing on Broadway. Mom had been talking about it for weeks. She'd made him a special costume, spent Saturday sewing sequins on his jacket. My little sister Emma had drawn him a poster. The whole house was excited for Marcus. Me, I'd gotten a card that said, "Happy Birthday," with a $5 bill inside, no cake. We were having his play, so a family dinner wasn't happening. I understood. I was the middle child. I'd learned early how to be flexible. Around 4 o'clock that afternoon, Mom came into the kitchen where I was doing homework at the table. "Sarah, we're leaving in about an hour for Marcus's play. Dad's picking up groceries before we go." I looked up from my math assignment. "Am I coming?" She paused, and in that pause, I felt something shift. "No. Actually, we need you to stay home. You're old enough to be by yourself for a few hours. We'll be back by 9. I stared at her. "Alone? For real?" "Yes." She didn't quite meet my eyes. "Emma's coming with us. She'll cry if she can't see her brother perform, but you'll be fine here. You're a big girl now." I nodded slowly because that's what I did. I accepted things. I didn't fight them. That was my role. "So you need dinner." She went to her purse and pulled out a $20 bill. "Order yourself something or make something at home. We have pasta and sauce in the cupboard. Be responsible. Don't answer the door. Don't leave the house." She set the $20 on the table, and I remember looking at it, this piece of paper that was supposed to represent parental responsibility, and feeling the weight of what it meant. They were leaving me alone. Not with a babysitter, not with a trusted neighbor. Alone. I was 11 years old. Not too old to be scared, but apparently old enough that they didn't need to worry about it. They left at 5 o'clock. I heard the car pull out of the driveway and the sound of it disappearing down the street. For the first hour, I was fine. I made myself dinner, some combination of pasta and jarred sauce, sat at the kitchen table alone, and told myself this was normal, that lots of kids my age stayed home by themselves. But around 6:30, darkness started creeping in through the windows. The house made sounds I'd never noticed before, creaks and pops and the hum of the refrigerator. I turned on every light. I called my best friend, Jennifer, and we talked for an hour, but eventually, her mom told her to get off the phone. 8 o'clock came and went. 9 o'clock, 9:30, 10. The clock kept moving, but my parents didn't come back. I wasn't panicked yet, just confused. Maybe the play ran long. Maybe they stopped for dessert. But then 10:30 rolled around and they still weren't home. By 11, I started to genuinely worry. I went to the living room window and watched the empty street, looking for car headlights. Nothing. At midnight, I made a decision. I called my mom's cell phone. It went to voicemail. I called my dad's phone. Same thing. I called the house phone from the kitchen, panicking, thinking maybe I'd made a mistake. But no, nobody answered because nobody was there. I was home alone at 11 p.m., and my parents had vanished. I don't remember sleeping that night. I remember sitting on the couch under a blanket, every light in the house on, waiting for them to come home. When dawn started breaking, I saw car headlights pull into the driveway. Finally. But when the door opened, it wasn't my parents. It was my Aunt Michelle, my mom's sister, and her face was pale, worried. Sarah. She came right to me. "Oh my God. Sarah, are you okay? What happened? Where are my parents?" She sat down beside me and explained that there had been an accident at the parking lot after the play. Nothing serious, thank God, but Dad had backed into another car. He'd been cited for not paying attention. The police had gotten involved. They'd been dealing with the aftermath for hours. They'd lost track of time. They'd forgotten I was home alone. Forgotten. I was 11 years old, and they'd forgotten I existed. Aunt Michelle made pancakes and acted like everything was fine. But when my parents finally came home, something had shifted in me. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just watched them, really looked at them, and understood that I wasn't safe in their hands the way I needed to be. They'd left me a $20 bill and a house full of fear, and they couldn't even manage to remember I was there. The worst part was how they handled it. Dad apologized. Sort of. He said it was an accident, that they'd gotten caught up dealing with the police and lost track of time. Mom said I was old enough to handle a few hours alone. What was the big deal? Emma had the more important evening, her brother's play. I needed to be more understanding. The message was clear. My needs, my safety, my terror through the night, these things mattered less than the inconvenience of having left me behind. Less than Marcus's play, less than their own mistake and the hassle of dealing with it. I was the sacrifice. I was the one who could handle things alone because nobody needed to help me handle them. And I made a silent decision that night, lying in my bed, listening to my parents talk downstairs about the accident and the other car and the citation. I decided I would be the kind of person who didn't need anybody. I would be strong enough that being left behind didn't hurt. I would make sure that whatever happened, I could handle it with a $20 bill and whatever was in the cupboard. That decision, made in darkness at 11 years old, would shape the next 2 decades of my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. Growing up as the middle child in the Chen household, I learned early that attention was a currency with limited supply, and I wasn't in the market. Marcus was the golden child, the oldest, the one who set the bar and exceeded expectations. Everything he did was noteworthy. Every school achievement was celebrated. Every talent was nurtured. When he made the soccer team in 6th grade, Dad bought him top-of-the-line cleats, the expensive kind that cost more than $100. When he got accepted to his first choice middle school, we had a family dinner at a restaurant to celebrate. When he turned 13, he got a PlayStation because he'd done well on his exams. Dad spent an entire Saturday setting it up and explained all the games Marcus could play. When Marcus complained about his teacher in 8th grade, my parents scheduled a meeting with the school principal to make sure he was in the right class. They fought for him. They advocated for him. They made sure he knew he mattered. Emma was the baby, and babies got attention by default. She was cute and small, and everything she did was precious. Her first drawing made it on the refrigerator with a magnet. Her first lost tooth was a big event. Mom made a special tooth fairy envelope and wrote her a note. When she cried and people came running, Mom knelt down and asked what was wrong, speaking in that special voice that said you matter to me. Dad bought her special things to make her feel better. When Emma was upset about something at school, Mom would sit with her for an hour talking about her feelings. When Emma wanted to try dance class, they signed her up immediately. When she didn't like the teacher, they found a different studio. When she said she might want to try gymnastics instead, they didn't hesitate. They were building her, nurturing her, giving her the space to figure out who she was. But me, I was caught in the middle, old enough to be independent, young enough to still need things, but not quite the right age to deserve special attention. By the time I was 13, I understood the family hierarchy completely. Marcus got investment. Emma got warmth and flexibility and endless chances to figure out what she wanted. I got whatever was left over. And I learned to want less so that not getting things didn't feel like rejection. The pattern became impossible to ignore once I started paying attention to it. Birthday parties were a perfect example. When Marcus turned 12, my parents threw him a party at the bowling alley. 12 kids came. There was pizza and cake and a DJ playing music for 2 hours. My parents hired the DJ specifically for Marcus. The whole neighborhood knew about it. People talked about Marcus's bowling party for weeks. When Emma turned 6, my parents did a princess tea party at home. They made it special, decorated with streamers and balloons, had a cake shaped like a castle that Mom stayed up until midnight baking. There were photos of Emma in her princess dress everywhere. Emma got to be celebrated. When my birthday came around 2 weeks after Emma's, the year I turned 12, my parents took me out to dinner with Marcus and Emma. Just dinner, no party, no friends invited, no special decoration or cake. We went to a regular restaurant, the kind where we usually just got regular service, and we sat at a table and ate. I remember pretending I was fine with it, that I understood that 2 birthday celebrations so close together was too much. But inside, I was cataloging it, adding it to the list of evidence that I didn't matter quite the same way the others did. They didn't hire a DJ for me. They didn't stay up late baking a special cake. They didn't decorate. I was just there, something they had to do. An obligation squeezed between Marcus's achievement and Emma's needs. School was the same. When Marcus got an award for being on the honor roll, they displayed it prominently on the mantle, right at eye level, where everyone who visited saw it. When Emma won a ribbon at a school art show, there were photos everywhere. On the refrigerator, on the bulletin board in the kitchen, even one in the hallway. When I won a debate competition, they said that was nice and asked if I wanted anything for dinner. Nobody came to my debate competition. When I asked if they could come to the next one, my mom said maybe, but Emma had soccer practice that day, so probably not. Emma's soccer practice mattered more than my competition. That was what they were telling me. And each time, I adjusted my expectations downward. I learned to celebrate my own achievements because nobody else would. I learned to handle disappointment alone because asking for help only made me feel more invisible. I learned that my accomplishments were private things I did for myself, not things that brought the family together or made them proud. I was 17 before I realized that I had never once heard my parents talk about me the way they talked about Marcus and Emma. I was 18 before I stopped waiting for them to start. By 14, there was an incident that crystallized everything. I'd been working hard in school, trying to get straight A's because I thought maybe that would make my parents proud. That maybe academic achievement could be my thing the way soccer was Marcus's thing. I spent weeks preparing for that semester. I stayed up late studying. I asked for help in English class because I wanted that A. I wrote and rewrote my essays. I brought home my semester grades, 4 A's and 1 B+ in English. I was genuinely proud of that B+ because Mrs. Martinez had a reputation for being tough and standards, and most kids got C's in her class. I'd worked hard for that B+. It felt like proof that I could accomplish things when I tried. I showed my parents at dinner that night with some tentative hope. I expected something, I don't know what. Maybe acknowledgement of the effort, maybe a great job, Sarah, maybe something. Marcus had gotten mostly A's in 9th grade, and everyone had celebrated. Everyone. Dad glanced at my report card and said, "That's nice. The B+ needs work, though. Nothing else." My mom was distracted, her phone on the table in front of her, not really looking at my grades. She was focused on Emma, who had just announced she'd been chosen for a special art program at school. The art program was a big deal in our house because Emma had decided she wanted to be an artist, and this was proof of her talent. Suddenly, my parents were having conversations about her talent, about what made her special as an artist, about art classes, about nurturing her creativity. They signed her up for private lessons with an expensive art teacher. They bought her professional supplies. They took her to the art museum on Saturdays. All of that happened within a week. My straight A report card? It got put on the refrigerator for about 3 days before Emma's art program, A, announcement replaced it. I remember taking it down myself. I remember feeling something harden in my chest, like a door closing, like a choice being made. And in that moment, I stopped trying. I stopped hoping that being good enough would make them love me the way they loved Marcus and Emma. I stopped thinking there was some magic formula of achievement or behavior or perfect responsibility that would make them see me. I accepted the truth that I'd been slowly learning since age 11. Some children get chosen and some children don't. Some children get art lessons and basketball tournaments and piano teachers and encouragement. Some children get a $20 bill and the message that they should figure things out alone. I had not been chosen, and that was okay. I would figure things out. By myself. I would be the kind of person who didn't need anyone. School became my escape. I spent more time there than at home, joining clubs I didn't care about just to avoid coming back to a house where I was invisible. Debate team, volunteer club, math club, student government. I was stretching myself thin, juggling activities just to stay away, but nobody noticed. The debate team required me to stay late 3 nights a week and travel to competitions on weekends. Perfect. I didn't have to go home. I didn't have to sit around watching Emma get attention for her homework or Marcus get praised for being naturally smart or casually successful at everything. I could exist in an environment where effort mattered, where my words might actually mean something, where judges scored my arguments on their merits, not on whether I was the golden child or the baby. It didn't matter that I was terrified of public speaking, that my hands shook when I stood up in front of an audience. The fear was better than the emptiness at home. The fear meant I was alive. I was pushing myself. I was doing something that mattered. My parents never asked why I was gone so much. They never questioned whether something was wrong. They never said, "Sarah, we miss you," or "Why aren't you home for dinner?" or "We'd love to come watch one of your debate competitions." They just seemed relieved that I was managing on my own, that I didn't require their attention, that I was solving my own problems, that I was the easy child who didn't demand anything from them. By 15, I'd gotten a part-time job at a grocery store. I told my parents I needed spending money. The truth was I needed somewhere to be where someone might actually notice me working, where I might matter to someone. I worked Friday nights and Saturdays, stocking shelves and working the register and learning how to use a cash register and how to deal with customers. The assistant manager, this guy named David, who was maybe 23, he'd say things like, "Sarah, good job on the display today. Really organized. That section looks great." And I would feel something in me wake up like a plant finally getting water after a drought. Someone had seen me. Someone had noticed my effort and acknowledged it specifically. It wasn't love, not even close. But it was attention and evidence that I had value, and I was learning to settle for scraps because scraps were better than nothing. That's what happens when your own family doesn't provide the basic acknowledgement that you're there, that you matter, that you're someone worth paying attention to. You start looking for it anywhere. You start being grateful for a sentence from a near stranger because your own parents can't be bothered to say similar things. I worked there for 3 years, all through the end of high school, building seniority and experience. My parents asked once if I made enough money. They didn't ask if I liked it, if I was happy, if the work was fulfilling or miserable, if my manager treated me well, if I was okay. Just if I was making enough. That was what they cared about, that I was self-sufficient, that I was handling things. My parents' reaction to the job was completely predictable. Dad said it was good that I was learning responsibility. Mom said I should make sure it didn't interfere with my grades. Neither of them asked how I was doing, if the job was hard, if I was happy, if the work was interesting or boring or fulfilling. They didn't ask if I felt tired. They just accepted it as one less thing they had to worry about, one less time they had to make sure I was okay, one less financial obligation they had to consider. By that point, I completely internalized the message. I was on my own. I should be fine with it. And if I wasn't fine, that was my problem to solve. I didn't bring my feelings to them anymore. I didn't ask for help. I didn't expect anything. I became the kind of kid who never required anything. The kid who made her own dinner, who did her own homework, who didn't cry, who didn't ask for much, who didn't complain. I was the easy child. And easy children, I learned, are the ones nobody worries about because they don't make any noise. Easy children are forgotten because they're convenient. Nobody has to check in on easy children. Nobody has to wonder if they're okay. By 16, I was completely independent. I paid for my own phone with grocery store money. I bought my own clothes from thrift stores. I started saving for college in a separate account from the money I earned because it was becoming clear that my parents, while not outwardly forbidding me from going, weren't planning to help pay for it. Marcus would get their support for college because he was the invested one, the golden child. Emma would get their support because she was the baby and they couldn't say no to her. But me, I would figure it out because that's what I did. I figured things out. I figured out dinner from a $20 bill at 11. I figured out how to get acknowledgement from people who weren't my family. I figured out survival. I figured out how to want less so that not having things didn't hurt as much. By 25, I was the kind of person who never asked anyone for anything. I'd gone to college on scholarships and student loans. I'd worked through school, taking classes during the day, and working retail in the evenings. I'd graduated with decent grades and no family support and no resentment because I'd learned that resenting things I couldn't change was a waste of energy. I'd gotten a job in business management at a mid-sized company making decent money. I had my own apartment, my own car, my own life completely separate from my family. I didn't depend on my parents for money or advice or anything. We had a polite relationship that existed mostly through obligatory phone calls and the occasional family dinner that felt awkward and distant. My mom would call maybe once a month to see if I was okay, but she never really asked. "How are you?" meant hello, not how are you actually doing. I'd learned to be alone. More than that, I'd learned to prefer being alone because at least when I was by myself, I wasn't being compared to anyone. I wasn't being overlooked. I wasn't experiencing that particular brand of pain that comes from sitting at a dinner table with people who are supposed to be your family while they talk about each other and ask you surface-level questions that don't require real answers. When I was alone, I was safe. I was just me, Sarah, the girl who figured things out, the girl who didn't need anybody, the girl who could handle anything with a $20 bill and sheer force of will. I didn't let people get close. I didn't let them matter too much. I dated occasionally, but nothing stuck because the moments samyos. Ned tried to be important to me. I'd pull back. My therapist would later tell me that I had an avoidant attachment style. I preferred detachment to risk. And somewhere deep down, past all the self-reliance and the hard-earned independence, I was still 11 years old with a $20 bill and a house full of fear, waiting for somebody to remember I was home. I just never let anyone see that girl anymore. I buried her under layer upon layer of independence and control, and carefully constructed boundaries that kept everyone at arm's length. But she was still there, 11 years old and terrified, and hoping that someday someone would choose her the way her family had chosen everyone else. And she was still waiting. I was 31 years old when my parents threw their 30th anniversary party. 30 years of marriage, and they wanted to celebrate with a backyard gathering, catering, decorations, the whole thing. They sent me an invitation like I was a distant family member they weren't quite sure about. No personal note, no, we'd really love to have you here. Just a printed invitation with RSVP information and a date circled in blue ink. I looked at that invitation for a long time. I held it in my hands in my apartment, sitting alone at my kitchen table, and I felt the familiar weight settle in my chest. The girl inside me, the 11-year-old with the $20 bill, she wanted to believe this meant something. She wanted to think that maybe at 31 I'd finally matter enough for a PO, personal touch. But the adult I'd become knew better. This was obligation, not desire. This was, we're having a party and you should probably come. Not, we can't wait to celebrate with our daughter. Still, I said I would go. I don't know why, maybe to prove something to myself. Maybe to show that I could be the adult who showed up even when showing up hurt. Maybe because there was still this tiny piece of me that hoped that after 20 years of silence about that night, someone in my family would finally acknowledge what had happened. That maybe my father would pull me aside and say, "Sarah, I've thought about that night for 20 years and I've never forgiven myself." That maybe my mother would apologize for leaving me alone, for not protecting me, for making me feel like my fear was an inconvenience. That maybe this party would be the moment where everything changed. I was naive, but I went anyway. The party was on a Saturday in June in their backyard. My parents had moved to a bigger house by then, something with more space, more room for the life they'd built around Marcus and Emma. The backyard was decorated with string lights and a rented tent. There were probably 60 people there. My parents' friends, our extended family, neighbors, people from their church. Emma was there with her husband and their 2 kids. Marcus was there with his girlfriend, glowing with the kind of happiness that came from being born into a family that knew how to love him. I arrived late on purpose, wanting to slip in without being noticed. I was wearing a dark blue dress, the kind of outfit that says, "I'm here, but I'm not trying to be seen." I got a glass of wine and stood on the edges of the party, watching my family move through the crowd. My mother was laughing, actually laughing, the kind of laugh I'd heard directed at Emma my entire childhood, but never at me. She looked happy. My father had his arm around her. He was proud of her. You could see it. 30 years. She was looking at him like he was the only person in the world. I wondered if I'd ever been looked at that way. I wondered if anyone in this family had ever looked at me like I was that important. Around 8 o'clock, my mother clinked her glass to get everyone's attention. The crowd quieted. People gathered closer. "I just want to say," she started, her voice emotional, "how grateful I am for 30 years with this man." She gestured to my father. "He's been so patient with me, so supportive of everything I've wanted to do." I listened to her list his qualities, his kindness, his dedication. And then she said something that made my stomach drop. "He's been such an amazing father to Marcus and Emma. They're so lucky to have him." Marcus and Emma. Not me. Not her 3 children. Her 2 children. It was deliberate. It was a choice. And in that moment, standing there with a glass of wine in my hand, I understood something that the adult part of me already knew, but that I'd been avoiding feeling. I had never been part of their story. Not really. I was a footnote, a side character, an obligation they'd managed but never actually wanted. The girl inside me, the one who'd been waiting 20 years for acknowledgement, broke something inside. I set my glass down on a table. I walked toward my parents. I didn't plan what I was going to say. I was just walking, my heart pounding, this pressure building in my chest like a storm. "That's interesting," I said. My voice came out clear, loud enough that people nearby turned to look. "That you have 2 children. Last time I checked, you had 3. The party quieted. People looked around uncomfortably. My mother's smile froze on her face. My father's expression changed. "Sarah," he said, like a warning, "don't do this. Don't do this." Like me asking to be acknowledged was something I was doing to him, something I was doing wrong. "I'm just making an observation," I said. 30 years you've been together, and your wife just thanked you for being a great father to 2 children. What about the 3rd one?" My mother put her hand on my father's arm. "She's had too much to drink," she said quietly, like I wasn't standing right there. "Let's just let this go." Had too much to drink. That was how she was going to handle this. Not by acknowledging me, not by explaining herself, by painting me as the problem. The drunk daughter causing drama at her anniversary party. I was trembling. "I've had half a glass of wine," I said. "I'm not drunk. I'm asking why I wasn't mentioned in your speech. Why you have 2 children as far as everyone at this party knows." Emma appeared beside me. "Sarah, come on. Not here. Not now. Don't be here. Don't be now. Be somewhere else. Be someone else. Be the kind of daughter who doesn't make things uncomfortable. Be the daughter who accepts being invisible without complaint." Marcus just shook his head and turned away. He walked back into the crowd like I wasn't his sister, like this wasn't his problem. "When did you decide I was the problem?" I asked. My voice was shaking. "When you left me alone at 11 years old, Or was it before that? Was I always supposed to be grateful for the $20? The party had stopped. Every conversation had ended. Everyone was watching us. My mother's face went white. That was an accident, she said quietly. We lost track of time. An accident. 20 years of treating me like I didn't matter was an accident. I waited in that house all night, I said. I was terrified. I called you. You didn't answer. You forgot about me for hours. And when you came home, you acted like I should be grateful that I'd figured things out alone. And I was grateful. I was grateful because you'd already taught me that needing you meant disappointing you. My father stood up. He looked angry. You can't show up at our party and attack us like this. Attack. Asking to be remembered was an attack. Asking why I wasn't acknowledged was a crime. I'm leaving, I said. I can see I'm the problem here. I'm the one ruining things, as usual. I turned to walk away. That's when my mother said something that stopped me cold. You are never grateful enough, she said. Her voice was sharp, cutting. That's your problem, Sarah. That's always been your problem. We did everything for you. We fed you. We gave you a roof over your head. Did everything for me, as if giving your child basic necessities was a favor, something to be held over their head forever. As if it was a gift instead of an obligation. I turned back to face her. You gave me a $20 bill and told me to figure out dinner, I said. You made me feel like I was a burden for asking you to come to my debate competition. You let me think that I was the problem, that I was too much, too demanding, that I didn't matter. You were independent, my mother said. We were giving you independence. Independence. That was what she was calling the loneliness, the abandonment, the feeling that I was always on the outside of my own family. I was a child, I said. And I was terrified. And you taught me that needing you was wrong. So I stopped needing you. I stopped asking for anything. I took care of myself because that was clearly what I was supposed to do. But here's the thing, Mom. I'm 31 years old now, and I'm still waiting for you to say you're sorry. I'm still waiting for you to acknowledge that you left me alone, that you made a mistake. And you're not going to, are you? You're going to keep telling yourself that you were just teaching me to be independent, that it was all for my own good. My father grabbed my mother's hand. We're not doing this here, he said. You need to leave. Leave, of course. The family's response to any uncomfortable truth was to get rid of the person telling it. I'm leaving, I said. But I want you to know something. I spent 20 years trying to figure out what was wrong with me, why I wasn't good enough, why you chose Marcus and Emma, but not me. And I finally understand. It was never about me. It was about you. You didn't know how to love a child who didn't fit into your narrative. And instead of figuring that out, instead of trying, you just pretended I wasn't there. Well, I'm here. I'm standing right here, and I'm not pretending anymore. I walked toward the gate. Behind me, I could hear people whispering. I could hear my mother starting to cry. But I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I was leaving the party, leaving my family, leaving 31 years of trying to be small enough to deserve their love. I'd made it to my car when I heard the shouting start. Something had escalated. Something had broken open. I could hear my father's voice, louder than I'd ever heard it. I could hear my mother crying. I got in my car and started the engine. I was going to drive away. I was going to leave all of them to deal with whatever mess had been created. But then I heard glass breaking. The sound came from inside the tent. I sat there with my foot on the gas pedal, hand on the steering wheel, wondering if I should actually leave. Wondering if this was my fault, if I'd caused this, if the girl inside me had finally done something irreversible. I turned off the engine. I got out of the car. I walked back toward the party. By the time I got there, I could see that my father had thrown a champagne glass against a table. He was furious. This is because of her, he was saying, pointing at me. This is what happens when you come here and stir up trouble. I was still the problem, even now. My mother was sitting in a chair, sobbing into Emma's shoulder. Emma was giving me a look that could have killed. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. I didn't stir anything up, I said. I just told the truth. The truth is the problem, not me. That's when my mother stood up. She looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Contempt. Pure, undisguised contempt. You always were selfish, she said. Even as a child, you were selfish. You couldn't just be happy for your siblings. You couldn't just accept that some people matter more than others. You had to make everything about you. Some people matter more than others. That was it. That was the entire truth of my childhood summarized in one sentence. They had decided that I mattered less, that Marcus and Emma were worthy of investment and attention and love. But me, I was collateral damage. I was the one who had to figure things out on her own. I was the one who didn't get to matter. I don't know how it started. I don't remember throwing anything or physically attacking anyone. I remember rage. I remember feeling like 20 years of being invisible, of being undervalued, of being told that my needs didn't matter, was suddenly too big to contain inside my body. I remember saying things I can't quite recall, words that must have been venomous because everyone stopped and stared. I remember my mother shrieking for my father to do something. I remember someone grabbing my arm. I remember fighting back, not violently, but desperately, like I was trying to escape a sinking ship. I remember police sirens in the distance getting closer. Someone had called them. Probably a neighbor, probably my mother. By the time they arrived, I was standing in the middle of my parents' backyard, wearing a dark blue dress that was torn at the hem, breathing hard, surrounded by 60 people who were all looking at me like I was the villain. I was the problem. The thing that had to be removed. Seeks. The police arrived as backup for the fire department. I don't even remember what emergency my mother had called. Someone said she'd claimed I was having a mental health crisis. Someone said she'd said I was dangerous. The officers approached me carefully, like I was a threat. I watched them assess the situation. Empty champagne glasses on tables, a broken glass, people huddled in small groups, talking in urgent whispers, and me, alone in the center of it all, looking like the chaos. "Ma'am, we got a call about a disturbance," one of the officers said. I looked at him, and something inside me just shut down. I was done. I was so done. "I'm leaving," I said. "I'm getting in my car, and I'm leaving." "That's probably a good idea," the officer said. But before I could walk away, my mother stepped forward. "Officer, she's been drinking. She shouldn't be driving." She was lying, or half lying. I had one glass of wine, but it didn't matter. The officer asked for my keys. I gave them to him. What choice did I have? I couldn't drive away. I couldn't leave. I was trapped there while my family told a version of events that painted me as the unstable one, the drunk one, the one who couldn't handle emotions like a normal person. My father explained that I'd shown up uninvited and started attacking my mother. My mother said I'd always had anger problems. Emma said she was worried about me. The only truth that went unsaid, the only thing that mattered, was that I'd asked to be acknowledged and they couldn't handle it. That I'd asked to be remembered and they decided I was insane for needing that. After the police confirmed I wasn't actually a danger to myself or others, after they gave me a lecture about managing my emotions, after they suggested I might benefit from therapy, I sat on the curb of my parents' driveway in the dark. The party was over. The guests had left. The string lights were still twinkling in the backyard, casting shadows on faces that were now turned away from me. My Aunt Michelle, my mother's sister, was the one who finally came and sat next to me. The one person who'd always seemed to understand. "I called you a cab," she said quietly. "It'll be here in 5 minutes." I nodded. I didn't have the energy to thank her. "Your mother has been terrified of what you'd become since you were a teenager," Michelle said. "Terrified that you'd figure out how she treated you. That's why she never asked about you, why she never got close. Because closeness requires honesty, and she wasn't brave enough for that." The girl inside me, the one who'd been waiting for validation, felt something let go. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't healing, it was acceptance. Acceptance that my mother would never give me what I'd been waiting for. Acceptance that no amount of showing up at parties or asking for acknowledgement was going to change that. Acceptance that I had to stop waiting and start building something different. The cab arrived. I stood up, brushed dirt off my dress, and got inside. I gave the driver my address. As we drove away from my parents' house, from the string lights and the broken glass and the disappointed faces, I finally understood something. The $20 bill had been teaching me something important. Not that I should figure things out alone, but that I had the capacity to survive anything. That I was stronger than their abandonment, that I didn't need their validation to matter. And maybe, finally, at 31 years old, I could stop waiting for them to choose me and start choosing myself. In the weeks after the party, I did go to therapy. Not because the police officer suggested it, but because I needed to. I needed to process everything that had been building for 20 years. I needed to understand why I'd constructed my entire life around being invisible. I needed to figure out who I was when I wasn't performing independence for an audience that never really saw me anyway. And in those therapy sessions, I started to understand that the girl with the $20 bill had taught me something valuable. She taught me resilience. She taught me that I could survive. But she'd also taught me something damaging. She taught me that needing people was dangerous, that depending on anyone was a weakness, that I was only safe alone. I had spent 20 years on that foundation, building walls so high that nobody could get close enough to hurt me. But the problem with walls that high is that nothing good can get in either. In my work with my therapist, I started to deconstruct those walls, not all at once, slowly, carefully, like someone who'd been locked in a dark room for so long that even dim light was painful. I started saying yes to social invitations instead of immediately declining. I started letting friends get close. I started dating someone, and for the first time in my life, I didn't immediately pull away when he wanted something real. His name was James. He was patient. He was kind. He didn't need me to be small or invisible. He just wanted me to be present. It took me 6 months to tell him about the $20 bill, about being left alone, about the anniversary party and the broken glass and the police. He listened without judgment. He didn't try to fix it. He just held my hand and said, "That must have been really hard." That was all. That must have been really hard. 4 words that my parents had never managed to say. 4 words that broke something open in me, in a good way this time, a way that let something new in. 2 years after the anniversary party, I got a call from my father. It was the first time he'd called me since I'd left that night. I almost didn't answer. My instinct was to protect myself, to push him away before he could hurt me again. But the woman I'd become in those 2 years, the one who was learning to be brave in different ways, answered the phone. "Hi, Dad," I said. Silence. "Sarah, I owe you an apology," he said. His voice was different, smaller, older. I waited. "That night at the party," he continued, "what you said was true. We did leave you alone. We did forget about you. And I've spent 2 years thinking about that, thinking about all the ways I failed you." I felt tears start to roll down my face. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because your Aunt Michelle told me that if I didn't reach out, if I didn't try to make this right, I was going to lose you permanently. And I realized I'd already lost you. I lost you that night when I left you alone. But maybe, if I'm honest, if I try to do better, maybe there is a chance I could be part of your life again." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I was ready to have him be part of my life. I didn't know if one phone call could undo 20 years of abandonment. But I knew that for the first time, he was acknowledging the truth, though, and that mattered. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the girl with the $20 bill. But it was something. James proposed to me a year later. He proposed at a small restaurant, just the 2 of us, nothing dramatic or public. He said, "I love you. I love the strong, resilient woman you've become. And I want to spend my life choosing you every day. Choosing me. Not as a backup, not as an obligation, not as someone to be managed, but as someone worth showing up for." I said yes. I said yes to building a life with someone who didn't leave me, who didn't abandon me when things got hard, who looked at me and saw me. On my wedding day, my father walked me down the aisle. It wasn't the redemption I'd been waiting for as a child. It wasn't the moment where everything was suddenly fixed. But it was a moment where I could see that he was trying. Where I could see that maybe families could be repaired if someone was willing to be honest, willing to acknowledge harm, willing to change. My mother came to the wedding too. She didn't apologize, she probably never will. But she smiled for the photos. She danced at the reception, she was there. That had to be enough, because I learned that I didn't need her to be more. I didn't need my family to be different than they were. I just needed to know that I was going to be okay without their approval, that I was enough on my own, and I finally was. If you've stayed with me through this story, I want to say something. Maybe you had parents like mine who left you to figure things out alone, who made you feel like you didn't matter, who chose someone else. I want you to know that it wasn't your fault. You were a child. You deserved to matter. You deserved parents who showed up and chose you. If you didn't get that, I'm deeply sorry. But being left alone, being made to figure things out, can teach you that you're stronger than you think, that you can survive. And that becomes a superpower. The key is to not let it destroy you. The key is to eventually let people close, to trust, to understand that surviving alone isn't the same as living fully. I spent 20 years thinking that $20 bill meant I had to do everything alone. What I learned is that it meant something different. It meant I had the capacity to choose differently, to build something better, to let people in. If you're struggling with this, please reach out to someone. Please talk to a therapist. Don't spend 20 years waiting for people to change. Choose yourself. Choose people who choose you back. Choose love over safety. That's where healing happens. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe if this resonated with you. Drop a comment if you've had to navigate something similar. I read every single one. Until next time, remember, you matter. You always did.